The comic movement in Scotland is very large and yet somehow unnoticed by many. In fact, the oldest comic in the world was actually made in Glasgow in 1925. It's called Glasgow Looking Glass and it's currently on display at the Hunterian Art Gallery in Glasgow. In this documentary, I want to show you that Scotland has a large involvement within the comic book industry. I also want to show you the rich and interesting history of comics in Scotland. My name is Euan Cordiner and this is Scottish Comics. There are over 700 magazines being published in Scotland today by nearly 200 different companies. Many comics have been published in Scotland throughout the years, so let's take a look at their home. Dundee is considered to be the home of comics in Scotland, and it's also where DC Thomson here is based. DC Thomson is one of the biggest leading media companies in the UK, and it's home to many famous comics. Let's take a look at them now. The Beano was first published on the 30th of July 1938 for only 2p. It is the longest running British children's comic of all time with nearly 4,000 issues published. The first issue sold 443,000 copies. The Beano peaked in April of 1950 with 1,974,072 copies sold. Today the Beano just sells of an average of 31,000. On the 15th of February 2007, the Beano's sister comic was published, the Beano Max. In 2018, the Beano celebrated its 80th anniversary with 3,945 issues published. The Dandy was first published on the 4th of December 1937 and it was also sold for 2p. The Dandy peaked between the 1950s and the 1980s where it sold at an average of 2 million copies a week. On the 4th of December 2017, the Dandy celebrated its 80th anniversary and the first issue was sold for £20,000. The Dandy had a really weird period in the early 2010s where they completely changed their comic and their style. In no more Banana Man or Desperate Dan on the front cover. Instead, the front cover character was Harry Hill. Within a year, the Dandy dipped down to selling around about 8,000 copies a week. In 2012, the Dandy faced closure after 75 years, but it did continue as a digital comic on the Dandy app. This however wasn't successful and on the 26th of June the Dandy was completely axed, but an annual is still published every year. It's clear by the numbers that the Beano and the Dandy don't sell the same way that they used to, so I sat down and talked with someone who remembers them in their heyday.
The Beano and the Dandy were part of our life growing up, really. So I have an older brother and he always got the Dandy on pretty much a weekly basis, or whenever we got pocket money. Sometimes we got pocket money, sometimes we didn't, and we'd go down to what was John Menzies at that time and he'd buy a Dandy and I'd buy a Beano, and then we'd swap the comics, and so we'd be able to read each other's comics, but I normally got the Beano and he normally got the Dandy.
So it's clear that at their peak, the Beano and the Dandy were huge, and most kids at the time were reading it. But nowadays we have iPads and the internet and subscription services that gives us almost an unlimited access to media, so it's clear that the Beano and the Dandy have not had an easy time adapting to the change, with the Dandy completely knocked out of the race entirely. Scotland is home to many famous comic book characters, some even more famous than you would think. Willie is a famous Scottish comic book strip from the Sunday Post. Willie is Scottish slang for Our Willie. The main story around Willie is a kid named William Russell who roams about the streets with his friends causing mischief. The Bruins are another famous Scottish comic book strip from the Sunday Post, and Bruin is just the Scottish surname for Brown. The comic is about a family that lives in a flat on 10 Glebe Street, and the main stars are the mum, the dad, the grandfather, and the many kids. I'm very curious to find out why these characters resonate with the Scottish audiences that they are targeting, and what is it about them that makes them so special?
So it's an interesting one because you don't really think about it. I think if we start off with Ur Willie was a kind of naughty little boy character, right? Didn't have a lot, came from a typical Scottish working class home, which many can identify with, as could I. There definitely was that sort of appeal about that, very sort of traditional family values as well. And actually that's probably similar to the Bruins as well. It was that family unit, it was a very traditional family unit, where you had, you know, mum and dad and actually 10 children in that family, and then grandpa there as well. So very much centred around those traditional family values.
To prove their cultural impact, I decided to go to the heart of Scottish comics, which is Dundee. Dundee is where DC Thomson is based, and it's where a lot of these characters originate from. When you go around Dundee city centre, you'll find many statues of famous comic book characters. A few examples are Desperate Dan and Minnie the Minx. Dundee are obviously very proud that this is the home of all these comic book characters, because they have like statues, graffiti and posters in every street corner. To celebrate the 80th anniversary for Ur Willie, in 2016, Dundee started the Ur Willie Bucket Trail. 55 5-foot tall statues were all decorated by school children and put around the city. After the event, the statues were all auctioned off for £883,000, and all the money went towards the Archie's Foundation for Tayside Children's Hospitals. As of 2017, the Ur Willie Bucket Trail was the largest mass public event in Scotland. These characters really represent Scotland and their culture, and they kind of work as an advertisement towards Scotland, and maybe that's why they're popular in other countries. People like to see how we live. There are many famous Scottish people in the comic book industry, but I want to look at two in particular, Mark Millar and Grant Morrison. Mark Millar was born on the 24th of December 1969 in Coatbridge. He's responsible for creating some of the most important comics of recent years, including Civil War, Old Man Logan, Kick-Ass and Kingsman: The Secret Service.
When it comes to modern day comic books, I think one of the main people that you have to think about is Mark Millar, a Scottish comic book writer. His impact on comic books, especially modern comic books and their place in the popular culture, cannot be understated. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Mark Millar is his boldness. He likes big popcorn style films, only in the comic book form. Not only did he revolutionise the Avengers, which I think plays a massive part in how they're now perceived on film, he's also had sort of a lot of impact on original content as well, things like Kick-Ass, Nemesis, Huck. These are all excellent pieces of work and show that comic book artists can not just keep the traditional characters going forward, they can also bring something new to the table as well.
Grant Morrison was born on the 31st of January 1960 in Glasgow. He's responsible for the All-Star Superman comic and Batman and Son. He's also the co-creator of the sci-fi original series Happy.
For me, Grant Morrison is a really influential figure in comic books. Not so much in the same way as Mark Millar is, because Mark Millar, like I say, is like a popcorn style. It's big, it's bold, it's for everyone, it's mass entertainment. But Grant Morrison, I guess you would think of as the modern brain of comic books. Some of his ideas are just really, really amazing. He also, in his book Super Gods, just encapsulates everything about comic books in such an interesting way. It's clear that he has an understanding that is perhaps beyond that of us mere mortals.
Both of these people are very influential and famous in the comic book industry, but a lot of their work has been adapted to break into other media industries. Millar's work has been adapted into many movies such as Captain America: Civil War and Logan. Some of Grant Morrison's work has been adapted to straight-to-DVD animated films, such as All-Star Superman and Son of Batman. Some of these movies are billion-dollar blockbusters and are some of the highest-grossing films, not just in the genre, but of all time. So it's very clear that Scotland is very influential within not just the comic book industry, but the comic book movie industry. And there you go. That's just scratching the surface of Scotland's involvement within the industry. Scotland is the birthplace of comics, and it's made comic book history. I'm sure there'll be many more printed here, there'll be many more adaptations, and many more people to come to the industry. You never know. It could be you next. And that's it. I've been Euan Cordiner. This has been Scottish Comics. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.